A brand new contract for Jordan Greenway, a horrific loss to San Jose, and a trade idea that might actually convince you that selling for futures is not a bad idea this week. All coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up? What's up? Welcome into this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can check us out on our YouTube channel where you can watch the show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Sneaky Joe DiBiase here following one of the most embarrassing losses of the entire Sabre season. But we've got some news to get to, and I've got some more deadline talk that I want to get in. I've got my best sales pitch. Not even that I love this idea, but I'm convincing myself I've got a sales pitch to you. If you don't like the idea of trading a Dylan Cousins or a Bo Byram for picks and prospects, I have an angle that you might actually might convince you that you want to do that. But we'll get to that a little bit later on. On today's show, we have 2 days to go until the NHL trade deadline. Of course, Locked On NHL's got you covered on all the national trading talking points as well. So a lot of good stuff coming this week on the show. We'll get to the loss against San Jose. I don't want to lead off with that. I want to lead off with the breaking news. But before we get to that, if you want your breaking news right away, be sure to check out our Locked On Sabres text club. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres is the place to sign up for that. We threw in the text a little bit ago. 2-year deal, $4 million for Jordan Greenway. It's a 2-year extension. It had been rumored throughout the day that they had been talking, and then there was a report about it being 2 years, around $3.5 million. And then the news comes in. Matthew Fairburn, the latest that I saw, that had the report that it's confirmed to him that it's a 2-year deal worth $4 million per year to Jordan Greenway. He will go into his 4th and 5th season with the Buffalo Sabres after this year. He was here in 22-23, here last year, this year, and now he'll get 2 more years on top of that. And I like the deal a lot. I did not need to see him moved. I thought yesterday when we saw Trent Frederick traded for a second, and there was a report about Scott Lawton being, a first-round pick guy at the deadline, that Jordan Greenway would be able to fetch a first for the Buffalo Sabres. But I didn't need them to do that. I'm good to see him stay. He is a unique player that the Sabres do not have another of. Big, power forward, can score a little bit, can play in your top 6 in a pinch if you really need it, is going to be your best penalty killer, is going to be your most physical forward, and he's not going to embarrass himself if he's got to play higher in the lineup like a Sam Lafferty or a Beck Malenstein would if they had to play more minutes. Can play on the power play if you really need him to, but again, not something that you're really paying him for. You're paying him to be an all-around forward that can play physically above any other forward on your team. And they don't have another guy like that. So I'm good with this. The reason, if you go back a couple of years, the Sabres trade a 2nd-round pick for him. The reason Minnesota traded him in the first place was they already had a Jordan Greenway. They had Marcus Foligno. And if you think back then, Foligno was coming off like a career-high goal season. He scored like 20-plus goals that one year for Minnesota. So they were riding with Marcus Foligno. He already filled all of those roles. They had a surplus, and they were able to get rid of Jordan Greenway. So they did, and they sold him for the 2nd-round pick to the Sabres, who did not have a guy like that. So now, a couple years go by, and he's somebody that has really gotten better and better in my eyes as his Sabre career has gone on. I was not really that impressed with him when he first showed up. That 22-23 season, at the end, the Sabres traded for him at the deadline, trying to push for the playoffs, and he didn't do a lot for me. He scored actually a couple of goals, 4 goals in 17 games that year, but I didn't see the energy. I didn't see the physicality. I thought he was kind of not meeting the bar on the stuff that you thought he was going to show up and do for you. So it was nice that he scored a few goals for you, but the stuff he was brought here for, I didn't really get a lot of that. Last year, kind of the same thing. Like, I was not a fan of his game last year, much at all. And this year, even though it's only been 26 games, and even though offensively it isn't any better, I see more energy from him on a night-to-night basis. I see more physicality from him on a night-to-night basis, and the penalty killing has remained top-notch in the NHL. So, not a player I was in love with at all before this season, but in those 26 games, I have really, really liked him. So, $4 million per year. The cap is going up to where it is. So if you do it, factor it in by inflation on the cap, the deal is almost about exactly what he was making already. You're just extending it 2 years out. So I like this move, and I think Greenway is somebody you'd like to have on your third line for the next couple of seasons. Now, with Greenway under contract, $4 million, only 2-year deal. The other guy is going to be Jason Zucker. And how does this contract affect Jason Zucker? For me, it should. I don't know that it will. They've been talking contract with him too, but I want a couple of spots open on this forward group for next year. Just a couple. Give me some reason to believe that you're going to make some changes and you're going to improve. And I'm good with Zucker staying too. I'm not offended by it. It's fine if they do it. He's 34 years old. He's way more offensive than Greenway is. He's been their best power play player, right? 9 goals. Nobody else has more than 4. So I am totally in on Zucker if he's back. I just don't need to see it, because if they don't sign him, that's an opening. And I want big moves. And I don't know that I'm going to get them, at least Patterson, whoever. But I'd like there to be a couple of openings. You never know. One of these kids from Rochester might be worthy of coming up too. So you could go either way to me on Zucker because Greenway signed. If Greenway wasn't going to sign, then I would have been in on signing Zucker. Now I'm more split. I'm good either direction. So I like the contract. I think they got him at a good number. 5-team no trade clause. Whatever, right? You want to trade him in a couple of years. There's only 5 teams. You could work on that. You could figure that out. I thought it was going to be a little bit higher. I thought that if you had told me this morning Greenway's going to sign today, I would have believed there would have been a Saber tax. And maybe there was to some extent, but I would have thought there would have been a bigger Sabres tax of this guy's going to say, I can hit the open market and I can maybe get a similar deal and play for a better team. Okay, you want me? Well, I'm going to charge you. I'm going to charge you. So when I saw that he was talking, I thought maybe 3-4 years at $5.5 million. So from what I would have guessed, he came in a year or two below what I would have been bracing for. And he came about $1 million below, million and a half below where the my thought would have been. He is not quite local, but he is from New York, Canton, New York, which is up in like the Adirondacks, north New York. So not really that close of a drive, but it's not like he's from Western Canada and he would have been, trying to get it back out there. So Greenway's back. When we come back, San Jose walks into your building and blasts you. One of the most embarrassing nights on the season. We'll talk about it. And then I've got a trade idea that I think you might like coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the games tip off or puck drop gets going, the NHL action is just getting started, the NBA too, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off, or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback or a third period comeback, you could stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. There's a lot of good stuff happening right now. If you're watching these Washington games and you want to bet on Ovi as he chases down Gretzky, that's there for you. NBA right now, Luka and LeBron is just like must see. So fun to watch. I love using FanDuel, the live betting feature during all those games. You want a little bit of a extra wager on it. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com, join today. It's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. A warm one in Buffalo today. High 50s, low 60s even. Might make you reminisce on when it was fun to go to the arena in shorts. But it's been a long time since that's happened. Well, last night, because you could have done that, last night would have been maybe the worst night in the arena all season long. I kind of led into it yesterday. Talking about this game, I said, you better be careful because your fans are getting restless again, and you got the worst team in the league coming into town. It's Buffalo Bills night. It's a special night, and you laid an egg. Laid a complete and utter egg. And you know what's almost on top of that embarrassing? To some extent, it's Buffalo Bills night, right? And Deion Dawkins was in town, because he was at Monday Night Raw the night before. Unless he's at Josh Allen's bachelor party, because that happened last night too. So maybe these guys get an out for this. But Khalil Shakir, Deion Dawkins were in town on Monday. They were nowhere to be found at that game yesterday. No active Bills player that I saw or read was at that hockey game. Sean McDermott was. Chris Brown, lead play-by-play man of the Buffalo Bills, was. George Wilson, former Bills safety George Wilson, was there. Oh, okay. A little strange, right? A drought-era Bills player. Maybe that's actually ironic. Maybe he should have been the player represented for the effort they put on the ice last night. No offense to George Wilson. Just, the era he represents is kind of the era the Sabres are going through right now. So, all right, whatever. Nitpicky. Put the Bills night part of it to the side. You're playing the worst team in the league, and nobody showed up. Nobody. Tage Thompson, Lindy Ruff, calling out the team after the game. Lindy said puck decisions were pathetic. They had way too many guys taking nights off. Tage Thompson said it was not their best effort, that he didn't think that everybody had put their best effort forward. Kind of blasted the overall team. Guys taking nights off. Give me a break. I can't believe that this team, what is that? What is that with this hockey team? Is it an arrogance of they think they're better than they are? Are they defeated because the losing has just built up and built up and built up year after year, game after game, month after month, that it all adds up and you just get demoralized and then you have nights like that? Is that the answer? What is it? Why does this team have nights like that? They are nowhere near good enough to get away with a night like that on their own talent. And that was a bad team they played. The worst team. That team had 11 regulation wins coming into last night. San Jose, 11 regulation wins on the season, and they looked like the Globetrotters. They looked like they were the Florida Panthers coming into town. They dominated the game from the beginning. The Sharks, the game was still close going into the third period, right? You had, how many of those goals end up coming in the third? Eklund, Celebrini, Will Smith, Toffoli. So 4 goals in the third period, right? It's 2-1 going into the third. It's 3-2 with 13 minutes to play in the game. And then just bam, bam. The score got away from them at the end. But don't take the fact that the game was close before that to mean the Sabres just gave up at the end. They were not good the whole night. San Jose easily, Macklin Celebrini could have had 8 goals last night. He had chances every time he stepped foot on the ice. It's amazing he only scored once. That was a better effort. The Sharks outplaying the Sabres. I mean, if you look at all the numbers, that team should never win periods the way they did against the Sabres. They're the worst team in the league. And sure, the scoring, the numbers go 48-43 in shot attempts and 23-19 in scoring chances and expected goals, about the same. But it's beyond that. You even getting a little bit outplayed on the overall by San Jose is a joke. That hockey team shouldn't be capable of doing that to you, and they did it. It's a terrible effort by the Buffalo Sabres. An embarrassing night. If I were to rank the most embarrassing nights on the season, I think this might be second. You're on home ice. It's a Bills night. It's, season's winding down. You've buried yourself, and you play the worst team in the league, and you lost 6-2. The only night I think you have to say, at least, maybe you could tell me, text in and tweet in if you want, nights that were more embarrassing than last night. The only one that I would say has to be above it, has to be worse, is the night in Montreal during the 13-game losing streak where Terry Pagula had flown to Montreal the day before in the middle of the winter to talk to the team, give them a vote of confidence. And then they came out and they got rolled by the Canadiens, who are not like the best team in the league. That was hilarious when that happened. The owner flew there to Canada in the middle of the season to give you a vote of confidence. And the final score of that game was what? 6-1. That's number one. Nothing tops that the whole season, especially because the owner was just there like 12 hours before. This might have been number two, though. This loss to the Sharks might have been number two. You want to pick out another game from that 13-game losing streak? That's fine, but I would vote this one as the second worst night. And one other thing I wanted to say about the game, because there are a lot of takeaways from this season, and now we're on a 4-game losing streak. Here we go again. Another tough night for Luukkonen. The expected goals on the night for San Jose was 3.11. And Luukkonen allows 5. So 1.9 goals below expectation, if you will. That's tough. And Luukkonen's numbers continue to steadily drop and drop and drop. And his season more and more looks like it's just a bad year. And I think he's going to have those. I don't think he's a good enough goaltender. I've never really been the biggest fan of his game. You all know that. I signed the apology form to some extent last year when he had the year that he did because I didn't think he was capable of that. I think you'll have a season like he had last year again. I think Luukkonen will have another year like that where, he has a winning record and a .910 save percentage and the advanced numbers look really good and he's the top half of the league starting goaltender. He'll have another year like that. But he's also going to have these seasons. It's what's going to prevent him from being like a top-level starting goalie in the NHL. The top-level starting goalies in the NHL, their down years are like average, and their best years are Vezina caliber. Though that's most goalies. Carey Price had down years. He had a bunch of league average seasons, Carey Price did. Marc-Andre Fleury has had below-average seasons. But Luukkonen's having a bad season. And so far, his best season is pretty good, even really good, but it wasn't the Vezina. So for me, this is what Luukkonen is. Next year, he might be the .910 guy, but then the next year, he's going to be the .892 guy. It might be every other. Maybe it's one of every 3 that he's really good. He's a fine goaltender, and he could be a part of the rotation. To me, it's the length of his contract, and that wouldn't be offensive. But the highest ceiling in this organization is not Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. It's Devin Levi. It is absolutely Devin Levi. The only way they're getting a consistent top-level number 1 goaltender in this organization, it's, to me, not going to be Luukkonen. It is Levi's got to hit. He's got to be the guy that we're hoping he could be. So that was just another thought I had last night as they're getting pummeled by the Sharks. All right, when we come back to the deadline, I've got an idea that you might like for actually getting some futures in a trade this week. Make that case when we come back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Back here on Locked On Sabres, Sneaky Joe DiBiase at Sneaky Joe on Blue Sky, at Sneaky Joe Sports on Twitter. And if you would like to become a part of our Locked On Sabres text club, you can hit us up. joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres is the place to sign up there. Some of the reaction in the text club to the Jordan Greenway news. One texter saying would have liked him closer to 3.5 million, but I'm not devastated over it. Another, I don't want Zucker back next year. Caught lightning in a bottle. Move on. All right, I'm fine with that. Like it, do you think him or the team didn't want more term? That's an interesting question, that it's only 2 years. It could be both. It's rare that a player in the NHL doesn't want longer term. I guess this could have been a situation, though, where you would think that because anybody who wants to be tied to this organization for 5 years, But I don't know. Maybe Greenway did want it longer and the Sabres were more hesitant to do it. So that's a good question. It could have been either side, in my opinion. Here is a trade idea. We ran a poll yesterday, and we asked about, would you rather do nothing this week, or would you rather trade a guy for picks and prospects, futures? And 66% of our listeners, about 1,000 votes, said, just in the Twitter poll, we had, of course, texters and stuff too. And I would say that was about representative of the percentages here too, that do nothing earned 66% of the vote, trade for futures about 33%. Let me try to convince the 66% of you, even though I'm not even sure where I am. I'm kind of on the fence on this, but I kind of like this idea. Me and Jeremy were talking about this off air, actually, during the morning show this morning on WGR. Well, off air, I guess it wasn't on WGR, but we were talking about trading and the idea of, let me put a label on it. The idea of the trade is a delayed hockey trade. A delayed hockey trade. Kevin Adams is looking for a hockey trade. He desperately wants to make one. And all the reporting is it's not out there. He's getting offers, but it's picks and prospects. They're even good offers, but it's picks and prospects. The hockey trade he made last year, Middlestat for Byram, a version of that is not out there for him right now. So, again, they're setting up and they're starting the PR campaign as though they're going to do nothing on Friday. There is another way of thinking of it, though, getting a little bit more creative. The delayed hockey trade, in essence, is saying this week, Kevin Adams saying, okay, yes, I'll talk to all of you about your picks and prospects. Whoever you want to pick the player, Peterka, Cousins maybe is better for this. Cousins is the number one guy for this. All right, Detroit, you've been calling me all year. You want Dylan Cousins? All right, let's talk. Let's talk about your best prospect, and let's talk about where your first round pick is going to be. Come on, let's have it. Let's have the conversation, Steve Yzerman. And then you make that move. You do it. And you take the blowback because that's going to come. Inevitably, if you trade Dylan Cousins for a first round pick and a prospect on Friday, you're probably getting blasted by it from a large segment of the fan base and of the media and whatever. You got to eat that, though, with the idea that I'm not planning to use that first round pick. I'm not also planning on that prospect that I acquire ever playing for me. I'm getting that first and that prospect with a mind towards flipping them again in the summer. So that, in the summer, if I'm able to take those pieces, and now because it's not the deadline and the offseason, you get more players that become available that are on good teams because there's cap stuff to be figured out and other teams want to make other moves and they might want to open up cap space. Right now, a little tougher to find an addition, right? Those good teams are hanging on to their good guys right now. Maybe in the summer, there's not even maybe. There will definitely be more of those guys available in the summer. So at that point, I take my first, I take my prospect, and now I go and get a different player and a veteran player, a good player. And then at the end of the day, what have I done? I've basically traded Dylan Cousins for another top player, another player that plays at the top of my lineup. Maybe he's a little bit older. Maybe he's a little bit better, but the age doesn't line up the same way. You know what I mean? You're basically making your hockey trade, but you're just not getting your end of it for a couple of months. That's the idea. That is the only way that I think it's acceptable that they are to move a player this week for picks and prospects. It's getting creative, saying, I'm not ever going to play that prospect. I'm not going to make that pick. I don't want to. I want to use those pieces to go get something else in the summer. That is the idea behind the delayed hockey trade. And I don't know what else they could really do this week, the way it's adding up. So now answer me that question. Let me run the poll again. I'll ask you right here on this show. Text in, YouTube chat, whatever you want to do. Now would you do it? If I told you, I'll put the asterisks on it. If I told you, would you rather do nothing or trade for futures, parentheses, that I'm going to use in the summer to acquire a veteran player. Then maybe you'd be open to trading for futures, right? Now, what is somebody? I don't even have the text yet. I don't have the comments yet. Of course, this isn't live. We're recording beforehand. I know what you're all screaming at me right now. Kevin Adams isn't going to pull that off. You know, I don't trust him with that pick and prospect. I don't trust him to flip those things into a different player. And that would be the best argument against it. If I'm not going to lie. I don't know that Adams will be the GM in the summer, but I completely understand that skepticism. If someone wants to tell me, yeah, I don't want him to trade for futures because I have no faith he's going to turn those futures into a different player. He did get Ryan McLeod, though, and that's gone well. Matt Savoy sent back down to the AHL today. Not that went horribly in Edmonton, but he's not quite ready for the NHL. Won the trade, baby. McLeod's been so good. All right, that's my idea. You got a trade idea. You want a trade question, throw it our way, and we'll get to it before Friday's deadline. That is going to do it for us, though, today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. If you're looking for more league-wide banter about the deadline and the playoff race and Ovechkin, you can hit us up on the Locked On NHL podcast. Make that your second listen, available to you on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, just like you're listening to here. We will talk to you tomorrow here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, a game night ahead of Tampa. And that'll be part of our show, of course, tomorrow as well. Lots of trade stuff, too. Talk to you tomorrow here in the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.